Oh, guys, I am so excited to introduce you to Dr. Peace Amadi. If you do not know Peace, she is a psychology professor, speaker, children's book author, content creator, and host. And she holds a BA in psychology from UCLA and a master's and doctorate in psychology from Azusa Pacific University. As a woman of faith, she uses her various platforms to bridge the gap between mental health, love it, and faith, love it, for the purposes of engaging a deeper healing journey. As a woman of Nigerian descent, she calls for reflection on how healing is affected by culture and family. And she's also the author, not just a children's book author, but the newly minted author of the book that you guys can pre-order now, which you need to. If you're familiar with our content, you guys are going to hear some overlap between what she talks about and what we talk about. But this book is called Why Do I Feel Like This? Understand your difficult emotions and find grace to move through. Peace. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Lori. I'm super excited to be here and feel very honored.
Oh, we're so glad to have you. I just can't wait for our audience to get to know you better. Okay, we are going to first get to know you better by asking you the set of questions we've asked every guest for the previous 165 episodes. And this is the set of questions. If the gospel is, I am more loved than I imagine, and yet more sinful than I believe, when was that gospel first good news for you, and how is it still today?
Hmm. So, first of all, that's a big question.
Is it?
A lot of questions feel really big to me because I think super deeply about everything, sometimes about things I don't need to be. But
Yeah.
I think I first think of I first think of college. I first think of college because that was when I was self-proclaimed completely out of control.
Oh.
um, and more so emotionally
Hmm.
than anything else. So I wasn't, the wild child. I like to tell people I was the pastor's kid who was actually a good girl. but emotionally, I mean, I've always been very emotional.
Hmm.
And I don't say that as a negative thing. I talk about that in the book actually, about how that's not
Hmm.
to be looked at negatively, but it does require a lot of understanding and a lot of tools when you are, here's the official phrase, a highly sensitive person.
Hmm.
You need a lot of support and a lot of tools and a lot of understanding to kind of navigate life, because life sucks, and especially
True.
right? Podcast over. That's it. Um, especially when you're, at that time where you're coming into adulthood and trying to figure yourself out. But I was a highly emotional person, highly sensitive person. I had hit a lot of adversities. I'd had a really bad breakup, and I just kind of lost myself, just kind of drowned in all of the emotions. And I see nothing, again, wrong with that, being overwhelmed by your emotions. But in that moment, I became really destructive. I became
Hmm.
really aggressive, even violent, not against a person, but I was a type of girl back then that if you hurt me, I destroyed your car. It was pretty wild. I would just, a
Hmm.
lot of things where I was out of control in
Yeah.
that way. And I remember a couple conversations with my mentor, where even in that, she was so intent on reminding me how much God loved me and how much He understood me um, better than anyone else and better than I understood myself. And while the things I was doing wasn't okay, the way that I was expressing myself and trying to communicate to people and to the world that I was hurting, um, my hurt was okay. And my hurt was um, understood by God. And He wanted to meet me in that. And that just was kind of the first time I saw God as gentle and sensitive and um, just embracing of me and of my brokenness and of my pain. And I think that's my favorite thing about him still, that even when I'm out of control, we're out of control, and even in the moments where we are doing things we're not supposed to be doing, when we're out of control, he's still like, I got you,
Yeah.
and I come here, let me hug you really quick. And then we can talk about how to better deal with this. And so God for me is gentle, understanding. Yeah. So, yeah, that's the
I
best.
love that. And I love that we're already talking about emotions because a lot of us can feel overwhelmed with them right now. Today, and you're touching on this now, like, waking up this morning, how do you still need the gospel's good news?
Hmm. I I still need that because I have a kind of related to a lot of what's been going on in the world. Um, I still need to know God is there and feel God there when I am questioning. Like right now, I have a lot of questions about what I'm seeing in the world and what I'm seeing um, from people who claim to serve the same God that I do. Um, and I've actually since college, have felt like this is the first time since college I have had really deep questions about faith and what it means to be a Christian. And I feel like I'm having to ask myself, do you still want to be this? Because of what you're seeing, because of what you've experienced. So, I mean, I'm talking like politically and like racial tension and like all this stuff that we've been going through the past, year, has really caused me to be like, whoa, I don't know how much I want to align myself with these people.
Right,
And I don't
right.
know how much they want me to be a part of them. And I'm speaking generally because I don't want to turn this political or anything, but I think you can, hear me when I say it's been really hard. It's been really
Yeah.
hard to be a Christian. It's been really hard to be a Black Christian, a Black female Christian. And so right now, it's that same I feel it's that same embrace I'm feeling from God, even in my big questions, even in my rejection of certain things from the body and even certain things that I may have believed my whole life. So I just feel like there's space and a gentleness and an embrace in my ambiguity and in my uh, doubt and even in my rejection and curiosity about how I want to just keep doing this walk. I don't know if that makes sense. That's the best way
Yeah.
I think it's coming to me. That embrace, yeah, just that embrace, even in this time of like, I don't know what's going on, and I'm really doubting a lot of things right now.
What's so great is God can handle all our doubts, and you allude to this in your book. It's less about I have it all figured out. I had it figured out from birth, and I had it figured out in my 20s, and I figured out now. It's like, are you going to stay with Him as you're wrestling
Mm-hmm.
with Him in that embrace? I love that. So, and I love that as an author, you're willing to still get messy with Jesus and get, I don't know, on the mat with him and wrestle through things. So there's a lot of people listening right now who, when I say these stats, are going to just be like, yeah, me. I just was looking at some of the anxiety. Speaking of, emotions, I'm going to more anxiety and depression stats right now just because of the last 2020 year. But in 2019, and these are two different studies, guys, but so take this with a grain of salt. But as a baseline, 8.2% of adults had symptoms of anxiety and 6.6 had depressive disorder symptoms. So 8% anxiety, 6% depressive. That's 2019. Bloop, bloop. Fast forward to 2020. Depression is in the US. 39% of people report depressive symptoms and 42% anxiety. So, wow, that seems like a giant jump to me. What
Mm-hmm.
do these stats indicate to you, Peace, as you are someone who's been neck deep, maybe all the way deep into emotions?
Yeah. So, just to comment on your first point, there's tons of studies going around looking at this, and so you'll hear different numbers depending on the study, but for sure, there's been an uptick, a significant uptick in anxiety and depression, and just like the two studies you looked at are indicating, and it tells me we have a problem. It tells me that people are really lonely
Yeah.
It tells me people are uh, hurting. It tells me people don't feel safe and secure right now in their lives, in their relationships, in their careers, and even just what's going on in the world. There's been so much unrest, and I've noticed is whatever because because our existence is so connected, we're connected to God, we're connected to each other, we're connected to our world. What we see in the world is going to be, we're going to experience internally. So the more chaotic our lives are, the more chaotic our world is, the more chaotic our internal environment is going to be as well. So even if we're already kind of experiencing, just our own unique struggles, there's going to be an implosion, just by nature of us being connected to everything around us. So
Hmm.
yeah, it tells me that collectively we're in we're in a tough spot, more so than we've been, and we need to figure it out. We need to figure it out because it's translating into increased suicides. Relationships are really struggling right now. Marriages are really struggling, and this is not new, but there was something I think particularly unique about 2020. Obviously, COVID and everything, that I think just took a hammer to the glass, and
Yeah.
here we are, trying to figure our way forward.
Do you sense that we've collectively gone through a traumatic experience? Like, would you call this trauma? And I know you define trauma, big T and little t, in your book, but does it seem like we've all gone through a trauma this last year?
Oh, absolutely. That's absolutely. It's been traumatic, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we are living in a way that is not um natural. We're
Mm-hmm.
we're super isolated. Our most important need is connection.
Mm-hmm.
It is belonging, and COVID has robbed us of that. In the name of being safe, and generally agree with generally the approach we've taken to this, but it's come with um, yeah, it's come with a lot of bad stuff, being
Mm-hmm.
forcibly disconnected from each other, which, if you read the book, I point to loneliness as one of the predominant reasons that, outside of kind of biological stuff, that we're experiencing depression, because we do have to consider what's going on physiologically, biologically, neurologically. But outside of that, psychologically, I would say loneliness, from my research, and from experience, my work, is one of the biggest reasons that we struggle,
Mm-hmm.
with depression. It's not everyone's story, but it's a big part of it. And so to answer your question, I do feel like we're experiencing trauma, and I feel that is directly related to what COVID has forced, our lives to look like or not look like anymore, as well as just the socio-political racial tension that we've
Yep.
experienced, um, and what that's done to friendships and relationships and internally, and to churches. I mean, there's a lot of division, there's a lot of rage, there's a lot of cutting people out, there's a lot of isolation, there's just a lot of stuff. And I think
Mm-hmm.
altogether, for sure, this is a little t going on big T collective trauma.
We're heading to big T.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you
So
think some of us, because for some, it's very kind to just admit the challenges that we've faced. Do you think that some of us are going to walk out of this with a little PTSD symptoms?
well, for sure. I mean, speaking from my experience, I mean, the last time I talked about kind of the effect of what 2020 was, I literally, named it, particularly around the racial tensions,
Yeah.
because I'm getting to speak a lot about this myself, being a Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the symptoms that Black people specifically were experiencing were straight up acute stress disorder, one step down from PTSD. And so I'm very familiar with those symptoms, and I saw that transpire. We were all experiencing that, every last symptom of acute stress disorder, which is just literally the first step on your way to PTSD. Now, generally everybody, I think for different reasons, have all probably experienced symptoms of acute stress disorder um, in 2020, maybe still in that, from all the different things that were going on. So, yeah, absolutely.
I just think it's kind to just say, so thank you. Thank you for just like acknowledging some of the pain that people are feeling. But now I'm picturing our listeners, and I'm picturing even where some of where you started in your book. And it wasn't about COVID, but you were just talking about how you were sitting in church and a pastor, you called it spiritual bypassing. Could you describe what is spiritual bypassing?
Yes, I love talking about this. So, spiritual bypassing is when we use spiritual language or spiritual ideas to minimize, dismiss, um, or just reject altogether our deep emotional experiences and questions and pain. So as an example, it's saying something like, "Oh, just let go and let God," to someone who's deeply worried about something, or um, just forgive, which, okay, it's like we know the spiritual ideal is forgiveness. And I say ideal purposely because I believe that scripture presents ideals. I don't think all the things that we read are just things that we are able, and even God expects us to be able to do overnight. It's literally all of these things that are in the word are lifetime ideals. We're all working towards them. And so just forgive. Ugh, it's like, okay. I'm a person who experienced a rape, or some sort of family trauma, or interpersonal violence, or someone just said really mean things that dagged us in the heart. I know I'm supposed to ultimately forgive, but I can't do that overnight. I can't do that tomorrow. I may not even be able to do that for years, to be honest. And that's just the reality of the situation. So while telling somebody to forgive is the ideal and the goal, expecting that that person be able to do that overnight is crazy. And so telling them that, knowing that that's not a real expectation, is insensitive and dismissive. Um, and that's just the truth of it. That's just the heart of the matter.
Yep.
you know. So spiritually bypassing is when we just throw these platitudes on and kind of expect people to just bounce back. And we can do this to ourselves. We do it to each other, and spiritual leaders do it a lot. And I think it's really unfortunate because I think we miss a lot of things there, and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Why do we do this to each other, to ourselves, and to each other?
I think that's a great question, first of all. And I think for a number of reasons. I think one, people don't know what else to say. People don't really know how to enter into somebody else's pain. That's not a skill that's taught. Um, and that's like a whole other conversation, right? Because I think we can better equip pastors and spiritual leaders to truly enter into the pain of their congregation, and the pain of their leaders. Like, that's a skill set. So this is not to, demonize anyone, but it's just to say there's a skill set that's lacking here, and it's the skill set of entering into somebody's pain.
Yeah.
One, and two, so one is just not knowing how. Two is just not being up for the job, not being up to being there for someone for real. I think our culture being so our microwave culture has one of the implications of that has been us just kind of hoping that we say stuff and people just get it together, and just kind of forgetting or not being willing to really be there with someone. And when we do it to ourselves, I think it's a similar thing. We don't know how, or we just don't want to deal.
So someone who's listening is like, all right, I fall definitely into the 40 something percent anxiety, depression. I have been spiritually bypassed by myself and by others. And when I meet, so I do coaching, my husband's a licensed therapist. His waiting list is 20 people deep. And everyone, all of his therapy friends, same situation. People are hurting. And I can't send anyone to him anymore. I don't even know. I don't have therapists on my Rolodex to send. So, can you teach us maybe a first step for someone who's listening who's like, okay, I want those skills. Can you help me to dig into my own soul and to even, I'm thinking of the ideal piece where you're sharing your gospel story where it's in the wrestling, in the pain, I'm with Jesus. Because I think too often we get Jesus juked or spiritually bypassed, and then we throw the baby out with the bathwater, then Jesus is gone. So can you help us take a first step if we're overwhelmed? I can't see a therapist for 6 months. Can you help us?
Yeah, another big question, but
It is.
I would say the absolute first step is just to pause and listen and name the pain.
Mm.
Um, what are you feeling? You know, is it anxiety? Um, is it sadness? Is it grief? Is there a loss you're still not over? Are you lonely? Are you hungry for something? Is there something you still don't understand? Are you still mad about something somebody said to you? Are you thinking about something, in your childhood? Like whatever it is, it's so important to name it. And that can't be overstated, because when you name the pain, you basically tell yourself that it's real and it deserves attention, and that there's something that your body, your mind, your psyche is trying to tell you. And that's the whole premise of the book. Like, why do I feel like this? The second question would be like, okay, what is this emotion trying to tell me? And that is something we can all begin to do without help. Begin, because I would say, okay, let's still find this therapist. Let's figure out
Get on
like,
their list. Yeah.
get on the list at least. But you beginning to sit down and pause and say, okay, I'm not going to just try to, okay, just forgive this person, or just let me just like, take a few deep breaths and keep going. Yeah, we got to get up and go to work and attend to our kids and do all those type of things, but you got to create a moment to sit and be like, what am I feeling, and what could this feeling be trying to tell me, particularly about what I'm missing. So emotions, I mean, one of their main goals is to tell us that something is missing, something has gone awry. There's a need that's not being met, a core need, whether that be a need for belonging, or a need to feel significant, or again, to somebody, a need for affection, a need for safety and security. What is that? When you can name that pain and take some time to listen and begin to explore the question, what am I missing and what do I need? That literally takes away a little bit of the edge off, because
Mm.
part of what we're feeling is that edge of not knowing what the heck is going on and not validating it for ourselves. Our brain is looking for a way to sort of understand what's going on inside us. And so part of the pain and anxiety and the angst we feel is us not knowing. And so taking the time to answer those questions can take a little bit of that edge off, just literally being able to put language to things and giving our brain an opportunity to understand, is helpful. I know that was like a
Mm-hmm.
big, yeah,
No, it
but
makes sense. And I just keep thinking of, you quoted Dr. Caroline Leaf in there, and I'm going to misquote the exact thing, but it's just popping in my head. And she said, once you can name something, it loses its power.
yes,
And once you can help it to, lose some of its power, take the edge off, then it can be changed.
yes,
So the first
yeah, thank
half of
you.
the
Hmm.
first half of the journey is just, okay, it feels so ambiguous. I'm so drowning. It's anxious, depressed. I don't know. COVID 2020, walk away, distract yourself, as opposed to sitting down with yourself and taking the time to name exactly what sensing. And as I was thinking about that quote, I was picturing, Jesus when, he's literally encountering the demonic, and he's like, "What's your name?" And I think that helps to take the edge off. I mean, Jesus didn't need that advantage, but they lose some of their power when they're not just this huge angry thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if they're doing that and they're able to name anxiety, depression, all right, there's something from my childhood. When do you know it's time to call up the therapist?
Mm-hmm. So people laugh with my answer, but I really mean this. I think everybody needs to be in therapy.
Agreed.
so,
I agree.
so I
At
mean,
some point or all the time.
at some point for sure, at least once in your life, definitely through difficult seasons or seasons of transition, change, grieving. Um, and I make that point because there's this idea that okay, we don't necessarily need a therapist until things are really really bad, you know, and we're 2 seconds away from doing something we'll regret for the rest of our lives. Where I think if we get into it a little bit sooner, and really look at therapists and just the mental health professionals in general as people who should be a part of our regular community in general. I think things don't always have to get as bad as they could when we're doing life so alone. And remember what I was saying earlier, how a lot of people don't have the skills to enter into your pain, even if they're well meaning. And so when you have a therapist, when you have someone that you're working with, um, it's someone who has those skills to enter into your pain, however mild or moderate they are. So you'll hear different things when with that question. I mean, the textbook answer is, when things are so bad that it's affecting your relationships, your work, your social life, all of that. For sure, that's get yourself into therapy or get yourself on a list. But I think if you know that it's a time where something's shifting in you, or something was said in church or and school that kind of reminds you of a pain you've been working through for a while, or a pain from childhood. I think it doesn't need to get to a point where you can't sleep, you can't eat, whatever, before you call someone up and say, hey, I would love to talk through this a little bit more. That's my bent. That's my bent. That
Mm-hmm.
just a huge therapy, go to therapy now if you can person.
If someone's on a waiting list and they're looking at 6 months out, and I'm thinking of a single friend or someone who's, it's just hard. It's hard. It doesn't matter if you're single or married, but I'm just picturing their community is really tough. And, but maybe they're thinking of a couple people they could possibly reach out to. Could they go through your book and like ask each other questions? Like, would that be something that would be feasible?
Yes. Yes. So the reason self-help books, especially ones that are written by, qualified people, can be really helpful. I mean, they're literally written by people who know what they're talking about and who have helped people through very similar things. And so, um, if if you're on a waiting list for therapy, or you're not even sure therapy is for you, because I get that sometimes that could take a long journey. A book like mine, I don't want to over promote, but a book like mine, is designed to walk you through step by step how to begin to unpack some of these experiences that you have. So I have a book on trauma and why we need to tell our story, and how it, not a book on trauma, a chapter on trauma, why we need to tell our story and how exactly to tell our story, like what are the important pieces of that. Is something that you can get with a group of friends or a mentor or whatever, and literally walk through and have someone be with you as you're trying to do some of these things. So absolutely, there's a good resource and a good community, however small, friend, couple friends, small group, leaning on each other to talk through what they're experiencing, what they're naming, where this came from, what has changed in them because of it, what they think they need in this time as they realize what they're truly hurting about. That is a journey that can be walked alongside with trusted friends, and a good resource for sure. Because again, the belonging and connection goes a really long way.
Hmm. If the church was really the church, would we need therapists?
Ooh, that's a great question. Um, I would say yes, because it's like asking, if the church is really the church, would we still need oncologists?
Right.
Would we still need whatever? I um, I think if the church was still the church, there would be probably less pain and less
Mm.
um, loneliness and less confusion. But I think life in general is so tough that the tools that God has given us through the science of psychology and all the other sciences are a blessing, and things to be used in conjunction with whatever support we're getting from you know wherever we're getting it.
Mm.
So I think we're created in a sense to need each other. I think God has put himself in each other for a reason. And I think all of it's supposed to work together. Our faith communities, our spiritual leaders, our therapists and our physicians and our teachers, and all of it's supposed to work together. Um, but I think the church inadvertently is creating more problems for people than they probably realize.
Mm. God help us.
Yeah. One of my favorite TED Talks, and is by a woman named Sarah Montana. She talks about forgiveness. I would highly suggest everybody listen to it. She shares a story of how she came to forgive an old friend who actually ended up murdering her mother and her brother. I wrote about it in the book as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in her talk, it's hilarious because she has this line where it's like, a million verses telling you how to forgive, telling you need to forgive, but none of them telling you how exactly to do it. And she's so, it's very real. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, where's that verse on how exactly I do this? How exactly
Right.
do I let go of the person that murdered my mother? How exactly do I let go of the person that raped me? How exactly do I let go of the person that abused me when I was 4? Like that is
Mm.
something that that God has encouraged us to be together in,
Mm.
um and
Yep.
figure out how to heal with you know each other, like in this beautiful life he's given us. And
Mm.
that's why connection, I feel like I'm getting emotional, but that's why
Mm-hmm.
connection is so important,
It,
because it's literally everything. And
yeah.
god designed God designed it that way. So I'm thankful
Yes.
for his word, but I'm thankful for the encouragement to be in community and to love one another and to be there for each other, because I think that's really the end of it.
Yeah. Yep. And really, his word, everything you're saying, that belonging piece is so. I mean, it's foundational. That's Genesis 2. We're made to belong.
Yeah.
If someone is listening and they are just feeling, oh, I keep ending this way, but I just so care about you, listeners. They're just feeling a little spark of hope based on what you said. And they've been doing virtual church for a solid year, maybe once a month. And they have a few friends they've been seeing a bit. Um, but they just have this hum of depression, anxiety, and where can they start right now? What's something they can do as soon as this podcast is done to do some of that connection to God and people? What's one step they could take?
Yeah. So two things to that. First, I just want to paint the picture with that to realize, first of all, that I talk about this in different ways. I have one metaphor in the book, but what I want to use today is to not think of your healing journey as this linear line of this point you're trying to get to, but instead of a circle. This is one way I talk about it, but when whatever point you are in your healing journey, however far you feel like you're off from being happy or whole or whatever, think of this immediately as a circle. It feels like you're getting further and further away from where you want to be. But if you keep moving, you're actually getting closer to you know, where you want to be. So it's literally this circle of a journey that we're all experiencing. And so I always tell people, make sure to remind people, keep walking, keep moving, keep putting one step in front of the other, because though you feel like you're getting further and further away, in one direction you are, but in another direction you're getting closer. So that's one thing. Just flip, flip that framework. But secondly, I would say the first thing, maybe you've done it yesterday, 5 minutes ago, do it again. Reach out to someone, reach out to a friend, tell them what you are feeling.
Hmm.
Send a text. Hi, you know what? I listened to a podcast where I was just thinking, and I just feel like I need to say out loud, I've been struggling. I've been really anxious. I've been really sad. I'm not even sure why, but I was told that it helps to talk about it, that it helps to reach out to someone. And you may not even know what to say, but I know that I need support. I need somebody to talk to. I need someone to check on me. I need someone to pray for me. Whatever it is, make a connection. The more connections we make, um, the 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 better, the more honestly life saving. Um,
Hmm.
so telling one person or one more person what you're going through, and telling them that you need support, and maybe it just starts with a hangout, a phone call, an outside brunch, whatever you're comfortable with doing in this time, but make that connection. It's literally where everything starts and begins and ends.
That's so good. I love that practical advice. And thanks for even giving the like words to say in the text. I just think right now, even when I'm meeting with people, I'm like, let's just go through your day. Let's just go through how you can make it through today a little step further. So thank you so much for that practical thoughts. Thanks for engaging my big questions.
Yeah, no, you're
Um,
good.
and for just sharing some practical words when it comes to really engaging our depression, anxiety, just the collective pain that we're experiencing. Just thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Lori. And I mean, you even plugged my book more than I did. Like,
Oh, I'll keep
someone
plugging
just
it.
read your book, and I'm like, yeah. So thank you for that. Thank you for affirming me and that and these ideas. And I can imagine the amount of trust your listeners have for you. So it means a lot to me that you've allowed me to enter this space and to share with people that is clear that you love.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, so this has been great. And I yeah, stand behind, reach out to someone, get a resource. I think my book's pretty good. It's a good place to start, but
it
there's
is.
a lot out there.
Oh man, thank you.
Oh man, thank you again to Dr. Wait, no, I'm gonna start over. Okay, man, guys, go pre-order that book. Why do I feel like this? Understand your difficult emotions and find grace to move through. Again, she talks about core needs. It's like really throughout the whole book. She doesn't have our exact same list, but it's a great list. And core beliefs, and just really, if you're familiar with our heart model, her model is not the exact same, but there's a lot of overlap. And so if you're interested in what we say there, I think you're gonna like this. Thank you again to Dr. Peace Amadi, and for all of us here at the Hole in My Heart podcast, guys, we'll see you next week.